case is very active, so there are things that we obviously can't speak to at this time. Personally, I'd like to thank again our officers and our detectives who worked around the clock on this case, our evidence technicians who processed the scene, and I'd like to extend a special thanks to the Office of the State's Attorney and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner's Office in Baltimore for their coordination, cooperation, and lastly, the leadership for the Baltimore City Police Department. Again, I ask that we continue to uplift DJ's mom. She's a grieving mother. This is devastating for both she and her two young children. Today, we also have joining us Lieutenant Rich Albin, who is the commander of our Major Crimes Unit, assigned under our Criminal Investigation Division. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Justin.
Any questions? Justin, go ahead.
We know from court records that there was protective orders, but as far as police involvement, have police been called to the home before?
There were prior calls for service to the home, but we're just not going to get into specifics in terms of the nature of those calls and some of the interactions with Mr. Banks or his wife, just because of the ongoing case, as we mentioned. We don't want to be leading down that road at this time.
If I could clarify the autopsy finding, asphyxiation could mean a couple things as far as I understand. Do you believe he was strangled? Was it possible he was drowned? Is there any clarity on that?
The evidence led to asphyxiation, and that's where we are right now. The investigation is ongoing and active, so we're just not at liberty to really get into more specifics right now, Justin, just based on where we're at.
Can you say, this goes to maybe prior calls, were there any past reports that DJ may have been abused?
I don't have information on that, but again, we have detectives that are looking at anything and everything related to this case. Any interactions the DJ may have had with family members, friends, Mr. Banks, his wife, everything at this point is on the table in terms of where the investigation is right now. But I just can't highlight that enough that this is where the evidence led to this cause of death in this manner, but it's very active right now where we're at.
Chief, you said that in the body-worn camera footage that you watched, there's this attempt to disarm the officers that were there. They showed great restraint. We hear of so many cases when somebody lunges for an officer's gun and essentially it's over. Could you describe that for us and the restraint that they used in not using their service weapons?
I can just say we, again, appreciate the officers' diligence, their efforts. Obviously, all officers are trained to retain their weapons. It's unfortunate that our officer was placed in that situation, and we're very proud of the way that our officers responded without having to utilize deadly force.
Just a small clarification on that, too. Were the other officers at the scene at that time because they'd been requested, or was there like a brief standoff where they had to call for help and then they arrived later?
So yes, there was a call for Signal 13. You heard Justin Mulcahy speak to that. For those who don't know, a Signal 13 is a distress call for officer in trouble. So there were moments where the officer was struggling, yes, with Mr. Banks.
But I mean, was it a continuous struggle, or did he back off and then the officers arrived and they took him into custody? Or
I'd say it was a continuous struggle.
Just clarify. Thank you.
Could you describe at all the links that Mr. Banks may have gone to cover this up? You said, he wasn't being forthcoming, I believe, when he was first questioned by police in the scene.
I can't go into the specifics, but I can say with confidence he was very deceptive throughout the engagement. Any other questions?
What else can you tell us about Mr. Banks?
Other than what we already know, he's a Baltimore City police officer, and I know that he is actively suspended without pay, according to the Baltimore City Police Department.
I have a question you may have already answered, so I apologize. But are you able to provide any detail in terms of what we believe led up to this asphyxiation? I saw in the court documents with the order of protection, Mr. Jones's mother talked about how he had taken his phone. Mr. Banks had taken the teen's phone. Was this some kind of physical altercation that you all believe occurred?
Again, we can't speak to specifics right now. Our investigators are exercising, again, their due diligence. There will be no stone unturned, but it's still very much an active investigation.
Everybody good? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
you. Thank you.
Justin.
I didn't realize you were back.